March 18, 1945, Remagen Bridgehead, Germany. SS Obersturmbannführer Heinrich Schulze stood in the commander's cupola of his King Tiger tank, the most powerful armored vehicle ever mass-produced, and watched helplessly as American Shermans poured across the Ludendorff Bridge. His Panzerkampfwagen 6th Ausführung B, the feared Tiger II, mounted a 71 caliber 88mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Its frontal armor, 180mm of sloped steel, was virtually impenetrable to Allied tank guns. Each King Tiger represented the pinnacle of German armored engineering, a 68-ton behemoth that cost 800,000 Reichsmarks and required 14,000 man-hours to produce. Schulze counted the American tanks streaming across the bridge. 20 Shermans, then 30. Then he stopped counting because they kept coming. His single King Tiger, theoretically superior to any 5 American tanks, sat immobilized. Not from battle damage or mechanical failure, but from a far more prosaic reason: no fuel. The last resupply convoy had promised 200 liters. It never arrived. Schulze's technically superior machine, capable of defeating an entire American company in open combat, was reduced to an 68-ton pillbox because Germany couldn't deliver gasoline. What Schulze didn't know, what no German tanker in March 1945 could have comprehended, was that the Americans had built more Sherman tanks in the previous month than Germany had produced King Tigers in the entire war. While German engineers perfected a weapon that required rare materials, specialized manufacturing, and artisan assembly, American factories were stamping out adequate tanks with the efficiency of assembly lines producing automobiles. The mathematics of this industrial imbalance would decide the war more surely than any tactical brilliance or technological superiority. Germany had built 489 King Tigers. America had produced over 50,000 medium tanks, most of them Shermans. But the real story wasn't in these numbers. It was in what these numbers revealed about 2 fundamentally different approaches to modern warfare, about ideology confronting reality, about perfection drowning under avalanches of adequacy. The Tiger II emerged from Hitler's obsession with technological supremacy and a misunderstanding of industrial warfare's fundamental nature. In May 1941, when German panzers were crushing Soviet armor with seeming ease, the Waffenamt, Germany's ordnance department, was already planning the next generation. They had learned from encounters with Soviet T-34s and KV-1s that armor and firepower would escalate. Germany needed a tank that would dominate for years, not months. The specifications they drafted revealed both brilliant engineering and strategic blindness. The tank would mount the most powerful anti-tank gun ever installed in a turreted vehicle, the 8.8-centimeter KWK 43L71, with penetration capability exceeding any Allied armor. It would have frontal armor no existing weapon could penetrate. It would intimidate through presence alone, a rolling fortress that embodied German technological superiority. What the designers didn't adequately consider was how to build hundreds of them, or thousands, or tens of thousands. The Tiger II was designed to be the best, not to be mass-produced. Henschel and Sohn received the contract in January 1943, tasked with creating a tank that would restore German armored dominance as Allied numbers grew overwhelming. The first prototype, completed in October 1943, weighed 68 metric tons, nearly double the Sherman's weight. Every component had been engineered to maximum specifications. The gun could penetrate 200 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. The armor could withstand hits from every Allied tank gun. The Maybach HL 230 P30 engine produced 700 horsepower. On paper, it was invincible. The first production, King Tiger, rolled out of the Henschel factory in January 1944. General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, reviewing the vehicle with a mixture of pride and concern, understood both its potential and its problem. "We have created a masterpiece," he told his staff, "but can we create enough masterpieces to matter?" The production statistics that would answer Guderian's question were already being compiled at Henschel's Kassel plant. Each King Tiger required approximately 14,000 man-hours to produce, 3 times longer than a Panther, 5 times longer than a Panzer IV. The complexity was staggering. The turret alone weighed 11 tons and required specialized lifting equipment. The interleaved road wheel suspension, brilliant for weight distribution but nightmarish for maintenance, used 24 wheels per side. Each component demanded precision manufacturing to tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. Germany simply didn't have the industrial capacity for mass production of such complexity. The Kassel plant, even operating at maximum capacity with shift workers, could produce only 35 King Tigers monthly under ideal conditions. Ideal conditions, by 1944, no longer existed in Germany. Allied bombing had shattered the industrial infrastructure. The Kassel plant itself would be hit repeatedly, reducing production to a trickle. Critical materials, the nickel for armor steel, the tungsten for ammunition, the petroleum for heat treating were increasingly unavailable. Germany was trying to build the world's most complex tank in a collapsing industrial base. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles west, a very different philosophy was creating a very different tank. The M4 Sherman had been conceived not as the best tank theoretically possible, but as the best tank America could produce in quantities that would matter. The design philosophy started from a radical premise. Adequacy multiplied by overwhelming numbers would defeat perfection hampered by scarcity. The Sherman's design history revealed American pragmatism. When U.S. Army Ordnance reviewed German and Soviet tank developments in 1941, they understood that American tanks would eventually face superior armor and guns. But they also understood something the Germans missed. The war would be won by the side that could put more tanks in the field, not by whoever built the best individual tank. The Sherman was designed to be good enough to fight, simple enough to mass produce, reliable enough to reach the battlefield, and numerous enough to overwhelm any enemy. The production numbers told the story of two nations at war. From February 1944, when the first King Tiger entered service, through May 1945, when the last one rolled out, Germany produced 489 of these magnificent machines. During the same 15-month period, American factories produced approximately 25,000 Shermans. The ratio was 51-1. For every King Tiger that Germany could field, America deployed 51 Shermans. But raw numbers only began to tell the story. The Sherman's genius lay not in its specifications, which were admittedly modest, but in its producibility. The tank used a cast hull that could be produced in existing foundries rather than requiring specialized armor plate welding. Its Continental R975 radial engine was derived from an aircraft engine already in mass production. Its VVSS suspension used simple bogies that any machine shop could fabricate. Its transmission, while not as sophisticated as German designs, was reliable and easily replaced. Every design choice prioritized production speed and field maintenance over maximum performance. At the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, formerly an automobile parts plant, workers with no prior tank building experience were producing Sherman tanks at a rate that would have seemed impossible to German engineers. The production line, organized like automobile assembly, moved tanks through 17 stations. At peak efficiency in 1943, the Fisher plant completed one Sherman every hour, 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. This single factory produced more tanks in a month than all German manufacturers produced King Tigers in the entire war. The contrast in manufacturing philosophy revealed itself in countless details. German King Tigers had interleaved road wheels for optimal weight distribution, creating a suspension system that required removing multiple wheels to replace an inner one. The Sherman used simple bogie suspensions that allowed wheel replacement in 30 minutes. King Tiger transmissions were precision-engineered marvels requiring specialized tools and training to service. Sherman transmissions were modular units that mechanics could swap in a few hours using standard tools. The first combat encounter between King Tigers and Shermans occurred during the Normandy campaign in July 1944. Schwer SS Panzerabteilung 503, equipped with 45 King Tigers, deployed to counter the Allied breakout. The tactical results seemed to confirm German expectations of technological superiority. At Villers-Bocage, a single King Tiger from the 503rd destroyed multiple Allied vehicles. The German gun could engage Shermans at ranges where the American 75mm gun couldn't even reach the King Tiger. But tactical superiority revealed strategic failure. The 503rd began operations with 45 King Tigers. Within 3 weeks, only 12 remained operational. American fighter bombers had destroyed some. Mechanical failures had disabled others. Most critically, the unit couldn't get spare parts, ammunition, or fuel. The tanks themselves were magnificent, but the logistics system to support them had collapsed. The Americans lost more Shermans in absolute numbers, but they replaced losses within days. Each destroyed King Tiger was irreplaceable. Obersturmbannführer Heinz von Westenhagen, commanding the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion in Normandy, recorded his frustration in reports that would later be captured. "We can destroy 5 enemy tanks for each loss, and we are still losing," he wrote in August 1944. "The Americans don't care about loss ratios. They have more tanks than we have ammunition. Yesterday we destroyed 7 Shermans in a single engagement. This morning, 14 new ones appeared. Our damaged tanks sit awaiting parts that will never arrive. The Americans repair or replace overnight." The King Tiger's technical specifications made it theoretically dominant. The 88mm K-Briquet 43 gun-firing armor-piercing rounds could penetrate 200mm of armor at 1,000 meters, 150mm at 2,000 meters. No Allied tank could withstand this firepower at normal combat ranges. The frontal armor, 180mm on the turret face and 150mm on the glacis plate, sloped at optimal angles, could defeat every Allied anti-tank weapon except at point-blank range. In any individual engagement, the King Tiger held overwhelming advantages. But modern warfare wasn't fought in individual engagements. It was fought across entire continents, over months and years, with logistics determining outcomes more than firepower. The King Tiger consumed 450 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers on roads, more cross-country. Its 860-liter fuel tanks gave it a range of under 200 kilometers, and that assumed full tanks, which by 1944 were increasingly rare. The Sherman, by contrast, traveled 200 kilometers on 600 liters, and American logistics could deliver fuel in quantities German planners couldn't imagine. The mechanical reliability contrast was even starker. The King Tiger's Maybach HL 230 engine, pushing 700 horsepower through a 68-ton chassis, operated at the limits of its capacity. Transmission failures were common. Final drive failures were epidemic. Track life averaged 500 kilometers before replacement was needed. The engine required complete overhaul every 1,000 kilometers. By comparison, the Sherman's Continental R975, while less powerful, could operate for 10,000 kilometers between major overhauls. Track life exceeded 2,000 kilometers. The HVSS suspension on late-war Shermans was nearly maintenance-free. German tankers discovered these reliability issues catastrophically during the Ardennes offensive in December 1944. Kampfgruppe Piper, spearheading the attack with King Tigers, Panthers and other armor, began with fuel for 100 kilometers. The plan required capturing American fuel stocks. When that gamble failed, the most powerful armored force Germany could assemble in late 1944 ground to a halt, not from combat, but from empty fuel tanks. American Shermans, supplied by the Red Ball Express, continued moving. The production costs revealed the industrial imbalance most starkly. Each King Tiger cost approximately 800,000 Reichsmarks in 1944 currency, roughly 320,000 US dollars in 1944. The Sherman cost $44,500. The Americans could build 7 Shermans for the price of 1 King Tiger. But the real cost wasn't just money. The King Tiger required materials Germany increasingly lacked. Each tank used 3 tons of nickel for armor steel. Each required tungsten for armor-piercing ammunition. Both materials had to be imported, and by 1944, the Royal Navy had blockaded Germany effectively. The Sherman used readily available materials. Its armor was simple rolled steel. Its ammunition used depleted uranium or tungsten carbide only for specialized rounds. Most shells used regular, hardened steel. America had unlimited access to all raw materials. The factories producing Shermans never worried about material shortages. When one supplier faltered, 3 others could provide substitutes. German King Tiger production repeatedly halted because of missing materials. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, understood the futility by late 1944. In his memoirs, he recalled a January 1945 meeting with Hitler where production figures were discussed. I showed the Führer that we had produced 385 King Tigers in 1944, while American factories had produced 17,500 Shermans. The ratio was 45-1. Hitler insisted that 1 King Tiger was worth 50 Shermans. I didn't have the courage to tell him that worth was irrelevant if we couldn't field them, fuel them, or support them. The crew training disparity compounded Germany's problems. King Tiger crews required extensive training to operate the complex systems. The transmission alone had 8 forward gears and 4 reverse gears, far more complicated than the Sherman's simple 5-speed transmission. The gun, while devastatingly effective, required careful maintenance and experienced gunners to exploit its range advantage. By 1945, Germany couldn't provide this training. New crews went into action with minimal instruction, unable to use their tanks' technological advantages. American tanker training, while less extensive per individual, benefited from superior resources. Crews trained on actual Shermans, not makeshift substitutes. They fired live ammunition in quantities that would have staggered German training battalions. They practiced maintenance on vehicles identical to those they'd use in combat. When they reached the front, they knew their machines intimately. More importantly, American replacement crews arrived continuously, keeping units at strength. German units, once depleted, stayed depleted. The Battle of the Bulge provided the clearest test of quantity versus quality. Germany assembled its last armored reserve, including all available King Tigers, for a desperate gamble to split the Allied armies. Schwer Panzerabteilung 506 deployed with 45 King Tigers. Schwer Panzerabteilung 503 had 21. These 66 King Tigers represented roughly 13% of all King Tigers ever produced, concentrated for maximum effect. Facing them were hundreds of Shermans from multiple American armored divisions. The King Tigers achieved impressive kill ratios. In individual engagements, they consistently destroyed multiple Shermans before being knocked out or disabled, but the Americans kept coming. For every Sherman destroyed, 2 more appeared. The King Tigers ran out of ammunition, ran out of fuel, broke down mechanically. By January 1945, fewer than 20 King Tigers remained operational from the 66 that began the offensive. The Shermans, despite heavier losses, maintained combat strength through continuous replacement. The mobility difference proved decisive. King Tigers, weighing 68 tons, couldn't cross many bridges without risking collapse. They had to detour constantly, consuming precious fuel. Their ground pressure, despite wide tracks, often caused them to bog down in mud or snow. Shermans, at 33 tons, could cross any bridge that infantry could use. They could ford rivers. They could move through terrain that stopped King Tigers completely. Strategic mobility proved more valuable than tactical firepower. American tank destroyer doctrine provided an answer to the King Tiger's armor advantage. The M36 Jackson, mounting a 90mm gun, could penetrate King Tiger frontal armor at combat ranges when using HVAP ammunition. The M26 Pershing, introduced in February 1945, matched King Tiger armor and could engage on equal terms. But these specialized vehicles weren't necessary to defeat King Tigers. Air power, artillery, infantry anti-tank weapons, and simple numerical superiority worked more effectively. At Hufvudstaden during the Bulge, a single King Tiger blocked a road, destroying 6 Shermans that attempted to force passage. The Americans simply called in a P-47 Thunderbolt strike. The King Tiger survived the initial attack, but was immobilized. Infantry then destroyed it with explosive charges. The tank that could defeat any opponent in tank-to-tank combat was vulnerable to combined arms tactics that American doctrine emphasized, and German tactics focused on armor duels, often neglected. The production facilities told their own story of industrial capacity. Henschel's Kassel plant, Germany's primary King Tiger facility, occupied approximately 50,000 square meters of factory space and employed 6,000 workers at peak production. This single facility struggled to produce 35 King Tigers monthly. The Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan, covered 1.5 million square meters and employed 15,000 workers. It produced 300 Shermans monthly. The Chrysler Tank Arsenal in Detroit produced another 500 monthly. American production capacity exceeded German capacity by orders of magnitude. The bombing campaign against German industry hammered King Tiger production mercilessly. The Kassel plant was hit in October 1943, September 1944, and repeatedly in early 1945. Each raid reduced production for weeks. By March 1945, the plant was producing fewer than 10 King Tigers monthly. American factories beyond German bomber range operated uninterrupted. They increased production continuously. By 1944, Sherman production had become so efficient that plants were experimenting with improvements while maintaining output. The spare parts situation revealed the logistical impossibility of supporting limited production vehicles. Each King Tiger had unique components that couldn't be scavenged from other tank types. When a final drive failed, the entire tank was immobilized until a replacement arrived. Replacements, manufactured in limited quantities at specialized facilities, rarely arrived. Repair depots couldn't maintain adequate stocks. By late 1944, more King Tigers sat disabled, awaiting parts, than operated in combat. Shermans, by contrast, used standardized parts across multiple variants. A transmission from an early Sherman could be adapted to late models. Engines, bogies, tracks, all were interchangeable across the fleet. Repair depots stocked parts in massive quantities. When a Sherman broke down, repairs usually took hours, not weeks. The difference between 50,000 identical units and 489 specialized ones manifested in every aspect of logistics. The crew survival rates added a human dimension to the industrial equation. King Tiger armor protected crews effectively. Penetrations that would kill a Sherman crew might be survivable in the King Tiger's larger interior with better armor. But this advantage disappeared when the tank was immobilized. Disabled King Tigers became death traps. Crews had to destroy and abandon them to avoid capture. Many King Tigers fell into Allied hands intact, simply out of fuel or broken down, their crews having fled. Sherman crews faced greater immediate danger from penetrating hits, but they benefited from superior logistics and support. Medical evacuation was prompt. Crew replacements arrived regularly. Tankers rotated out after heavy combat. German crews stayed in action until killed, captured, or disabled. The cumulative psychological effect wore down German effectiveness faster than combat casualties. The tactical evolution revealed American adaptability. Early Sherman models with 75mm guns couldn't penetrate King Tiger armor frontally. American crews quickly learned to engage from flanks and rear, where even the 75mm gun could penetrate. They learned to use terrain, to coordinate with tank destroyers, to call in airstrikes. The Sherman's mobility allowed tactical flexibility that the King Tiger's ponderous weight prevented. By 1945, experienced American crews had developed tactics that negated much of the King Tiger's armor advantage. The German army's solution to the King Tiger's scarcity was to deploy them in independent heavy tank battalions, attaching them to regular divisions as needed. This concentrated force multiplier effect worked tactically but failed strategically. When these elite battalions suffered losses, they couldn't be reconstituted. The last King Tigers produced went to replace losses in existing units, not to form new ones. By April 1945, total operational King Tigers numbered fewer than 100, scattered across the collapsing eastern and western fronts. The final production figures sealed the verdict. Total King Tigers produced 489 units over 16 months, from January 1944 to May 1945, averaging 30.5 per month. Total Shermans produced approximately 49,234 units from February 1942 to July 1945, averaging 1,200 per month. The Americans built 100 Shermans for every King Tiger. But even this statistic understates the disparity. The Americans also produced 17,381 M4A3 variants with 76mm guns, 2,212 M26 Pershings, thousands of tank destroyers, and exported thousands of Shermans to Britain and the Soviet Union. German production, even including Panthers and Panzer IVs, never approached American output. The reliability statistics drove home the practical implications. Average mechanical availability, the percentage of tanks operationally ready at any given time. King Tiger, approximately 40% by late 1944. Sherman, approximately 85% throughout the war. The Americans could field 85 tanks from every 100 produced. The Germans could field 40 from every 100 King Tigers, and they only produced 489 total. Effective King Tiger strength rarely exceeded 200 tanks at any point in the war, while Sherman strength often exceeded 10,000 simultaneously deployed vehicles. The fuel consumption made the King Tiger strategically untenable even without other problems. Each King Tiger required 450 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. A battalion of 45 King Tigers consumed 20,250 liters per 100 kilometers of movement. By late 1944, Germany's synthetic fuel production had collapsed to under 10,000 tons monthly, barely enough to keep the Luftwaffe minimally operational. Moving King Tiger battalions any significant distance consumed fuel that Germany couldn't spare. Shermans used 160 liters per 100 kilometers, less than half the King Tiger's consumption, despite carrying similar fuel loads. More importantly, American logistics could deliver fuel in unlimited quantities. The Red Ball Express alone delivered over 1 million gallons daily at peak operations. German fuel supplies to frontline units often arrived measured in individual barrels, carefully rationed. The Americans could maneuver freely. The Germans had to hoard fuel like treasure. In April 1945, as Allied armies converged on Berlin, the last King Tigers made their final stands. Schwerpanzerabteilung 503, down to 7 operational tanks, fought near Berlin. They destroyed dozens of Soviet tanks before being overwhelmed. Schwerpanzerabteilung 506 held a bridge over the Enns River with 3 King Tigers, stopping Soviet advances for crucial hours. These were technically impressive performances, demonstrating what the King Tiger could achieve when properly deployed and supplied, but they were strategically meaningless. The war was lost, and 489 superb tanks couldn't change that against 50,000 adequate ones. The aftermath statistics proved conclusive. Surviving King Tigers captured approximately 120, most abandoned for mechanical reasons or lack of fuel. Total combat losses, approximately 369. The ratio suggested that mechanical failure killed King Tigers nearly as effectively as combat. Conversely, Sherman losses totaled approximately 6,748 in Europe, but American production replaced these losses 3 times over. The Americans could afford their losses, the Germans couldn't afford their successes. Post-war analysis by military historians universally concluded that the King Tiger represented a dead end in tank development. Its combination of excessive weight, mechanical complexity, impossible production requirements, and crippling logistics needs made it unsuitable for modern warfare's demands. The Sherman, despite its modest capabilities, exemplified the correct approach: adequate performance, mass production, reliable logistics, and continuous improvement. Cold War tank development followed the Sherman model, not the King Tigers. The King Tiger stands as history's most perfect example of losing strategy through winning tactics. In almost every individual engagement, King Tigers dominated. They destroyed vastly more enemy tanks than they lost in combat. Tactically, they were devastating. Strategically, they were irrelevant. Germany couldn't build enough of them, couldn't supply the ones it built, and couldn't replace losses when they occurred. The Americans built adequate tanks in numbers that made perfection meaningless. The final irony emerged from German prisoners of war. Tankers who had served in King Tigers expressed admiration for their machines, but understanding of their futility. "We had the best tank in the world," one veteran testified in 1946, and it didn't matter. The Americans had tanks that worked. They had fuel to run them. They had spare parts to fix them. They had factories building more. "We had 489 masterpieces that couldn't change history. They had 50,000 adequate machines that did." This verdict stands as the ultimate judgment on the King Tiger versus Sherman question. Germany built 489 of history's most powerful tanks and lost the war. America built 50,000 adequate tanks and won it. The lesson transcends World War II, applying to any conflict where industrial capacity matters. Perfection produced in insufficient quantities loses to adequacy produced in overwhelming numbers. The King Tiger was magnificent. The Sherman was enough, and enough multiplied by 50,000 buried magnificence under an avalanche of steel.